in faith and unity, where the bonds of peace, of acceptance and love are the fruit of his presence here among us. So with one voice we'll sing to the Lord, and with one voice we'll lift out his word, till the whole earth sees the Redeemer has come, for he dwells in the presence of his people. Oh, how good it is on this journey we share, to rejoice with the happy and weep with those who mourn, for the weak find strength, the afflicted find grace, when we offer the blessing of belonging. So with one voice we'll sing to the Lord, and with one voice we'll lift out his word, till the whole earth sees the Redeemer has come, for he dwells in the presence of his people. Oh, how good it is to embrace his command, to prefer one another, forgive as he forgives. When we live as one, we all share in the love of the Son with the Father and the Spirit. So with one voice we'll sing to the Lord, and with one voice we'll lift out his word, till the whole earth sees the Redeemer has come, for he dwells in the presence of his people. So with one voice we'll sing to the Lord, and with one voice we'll lift out his word, till the whole earth sees the Redeemer has come, for he dwells in the presence of his people. For he dwells in the presence of his people. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey, and the honeycomb. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey, and the honeycomb. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey, and the honeycomb. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be accepted in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold.
This is. Good to see everyone here this evening, especially those of you who are visiting with us. Thank you so much for being here this evening. We are starting a half an hour early this month to see how that goes, but we're actually an hour and a half early than we might otherwise be because it's daylight savings time. So if you get the sunlight in your eyes tonight, you can blame that on daylight savings time. Those of you who want to keep daylight savings time and cheat us out of that 1 hour of sleep we've given up, just let you know. We want to go ahead and mention some folks who are in need of prayer and some upcoming events. In terms of the events, there are a lot of things going on in March. So look at your announcements from tonight. I do want to mention the things coming up in the week. Young adults will have their third Friday Devo this Friday evening. Excuse me, starting at 7:30. There'll be a ladies' class for our Spanish-speaking sisters. I'm sure if you're an English-speaking sister and like to join as well, you're certainly welcome. That's in the Ed Building, 10 to 12. I believe Juanita Bullard is leading that. On Sunday the 19th, everyone attending Last Year Leaders Convention will have an important meeting up front after AM services to discuss convention details. Money Nut for the Master on Monday. We also have upcoming the Bunny Breakfast. There's a youth group Devo, bridal shower for Katie Huddleston, and we are collecting cards for Riley Walker that we're going to be sending to her. And the last day to get those cards into Heath or Jessica Leisure is March the 26th. We'll be making cards for our Money Nut for the Master to contribute to this, so we don't want to mention that to you. Also, we have an announcement about preschool registration for next year for fall 2023. That's in your announcement sheet. Dorcas Day upcoming on April 22nd. Details and a pantry item. And then there's a trip that Bernice Henley has planned, and details of that are in your announcements as well. Just folks we're praying for. Let's not forget Paul Linton is recovering at home following very serious automobile accident at his mother's home. Joe Emerson back in the area in the hospital, and hopefully will be out in a few days. Let's keep him in prayers. Sandy Caldwell continues to recover at home from knee replacement surgery. She's doing very well, but she's going it solo. She's got a lot of wonderful neighbors checking on her, but let's be calling and checking on her as well. But at this point, she's there in her apartment. And so let's keep in touch with her. Amy Ill, still recovering at home. Be a couple more weeks before she's back in circulation. And let's keep her in prayers. Of course, we've already mentioned Riley Walker, Doug Drown, and so many others. There's a fuller listing and a listing of our expectant mothers in your announcements that you would have received via email this evening. Okay. David Willer is going to lead a couple of songs, and then Ed Work will lead us in a prayer, and we'll be dismissed to our Bible classes. David?
Our first song this evening, if you're using the book, is 345. 345. It is Well With My Soul. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul, it is well. Satan should buffet, though trials should come, let this blessed assurance control that Christ hath regarded my helpless estate and hath shed his own blood for my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. And Lord, haste the day when the baby shall be sight, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. Our song before we have our prayer and go to class will be 328 in the book. 328, In the Hour of Trial. In the hour of trial, Jesus stood for me, lest by base denial I depart from thee. When thou seest me waver, with a look recall, nor for fear or low. Grant that I may never fail thy hand to see. Grant that I may ever cast my care on thee.
Please pray with me. Sovereign Lord, how great you are. There is no one like you, and there is no God but you. Who are we that you have brought us this far? Again, how great you are. We confess our sins to you. You know how often we fall short of your expectations. We need your help constantly. Use us to be helpful to each other and to others. You know all who are sick and in need, and we entrust them to your care. Make us useful to them. We ask your mercy and healing on them. Thank you for bringing us together tonight. Help us to be ready for your return. In Jesus we pray. Amen.
Oh, there we go. Good evening. I'm going to beg off and ask you to forgive me for not singing a song as I often do, but saving the voice. So anyway, we're going to begin with Ecclesiastes, and we're going to be getting into the text tonight. Thank you guys for being here. Looking forward to this study. It's been a while. It's been more than 15 years since we've had a textual study of the book of Ecclesiastes, a quarter dedicated to it. And I'm really looking forward to this study because I love this book, and I think we all love this book, although I think it is a greatly misunderstood book. It's a necessary book, and I hope that we lay the groundwork for thinking of it in those terms. It's more necessary now than a generation ago. It really is. It addresses the world as it seems to be emerging, a world that doubts either the existence of God or the goodness of God. And this book really establishes what the world is like if there is no God, and if the God who is not good. I ran across this week from the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. This was written in the 170s A.D. by the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, probably their best emperor, just in terms of the dedication that he had towards being a good ruler. Anyway, I ran across this, and it really reminded me of what we're going to be reading tonight. And he asks the same question that this book asks, so I want to read it to you. Words once in common use are now out of date, and the names of the famous dead as well, Camillus, Caeso, Scipio, Cato, Augustus, Hadrian, Antoninus. Everything fades so quickly and turns into legend, and then soon oblivion covers it. And those are the ones who shone bright. The rest, unknown and unasked for the minute after death. What is eternal? Fame? No. Emptiness is eternal. So what should we work for? Only this: proper understanding, unselfish action, truthful speech, and a resolve to accept whatever happens as necessary and familiar, flowing like water from the same source and spring. I found it interesting that he looks at the world very much in the same way that the writer of Ecclesiastes, that Solomon does, and sees emptiness and sees the futility of fame because it doesn't last, and asks the same question: what should we, if this is the case, how should we live our lives? And comes to many of the same answers that Solomon will come to as preliminary answers before his overarching answer at the end of chapter 12. Last week when we began talking about the book of Ecclesiastes, I presented it as a grand experiment. I really do believe Solomon wrote the book. I don't believe Solomon wrote Song of Solomon. I think it's dedicated to him, and I don't think Paul wrote Hebrews. So I'm not the guy that toes the party line generally, necessarily. I mean, go where the evidence leads. But I don't know anyone else in history who would fit the description that the author gives of himself, other than Solomon himself. He's the only one who fits this description. And once we think of this book in terms of Solomon as author, and especially what he says about himself at the end of chapter 1 and through chapter 2, which we'll deal with next week, it just fits into place. He calls himself the spokesman in verse 1, and we're going to read verses 1 through 11 in just a moment. He calls himself the spokesman, translated in, and I'm reading from the ESV tonight, translated in several versions, the preacher. But we have a Christian definition of what that word means. And it kind of overlaps the role he's playing. But I like the phrase spokesman better, because the word does mean someone who is speaking to the assembled, those who have been called out to assemble. But the assembled, not to worship, but to hear the information. He's made a grand experiment of his life, and he's used his wisdom to sift through the data and analyze it, and he's come to a conclusion that we all need to hear. And that really is the way he presents the book. 1,500 plus years before anything like a scientific method is identified or called such, he really is pursuing this book in that way. He presents a problem, the vanity of life on earth. He asks a question: if that's the case, then what should we be doing now that we're here under the sun? Which is a phrase that will be the most oft repeated phrase in the book, under the sun. And it means what it says. It's talking about life under the sun, life on earth, right here and right now. He's telling us ahead of time, this book is not about the decision between heaven and hell, but the decision between a life squandered and a life lived productively under the sun. So he states a problem, asks his question, and then he gives us his hypothesis, which is nothing. There's nothing. There's nothing. That's my hypothesis. I think I'm going to find that there's nothing worthwhile. That's not true, because he does find things that are worthwhile. And then, beginning with verse 12 of verse 1, and going all the way through chapter 2, he tells us about his qualifications to conduct the experiment, and then he describes himself conducting the experiment of his life. Because he says, I have unlimited power, I have unlimited resources, and I have unprecedented wisdom. So I can do what I want, I can afford to do what I want, and after I do all that, I've got the brain power and the insight to sift through the data and to process what I've done with my life. And he does, to a great degree, squander his life, which I think the record alludes to in Kings and Chronicles. This is a man who early on was a good king, early on established a reputation for good governance and for great wisdom, who amassed a great deal of wealth, but as he's hitting his stride, starts marrying lots of women to increase his power. How many wives? 700. 700 wives, 300 concubines, 1,000 women. And what did he start doing for these pagan wives? Yeah, he started building, within sight of the temple, started building altars, to Baal and to Chemosh, and so that they could practice their idolatry within sight of the temple itself. So when we read misogynistic type statements, like there's a place where he says, in 1,000 people I found one good man, but you can't find even one good woman in 1,000. Jack Lewis, a longtime professor, well, he was originally at Abilene, but ended his career at Harding Grad and really was Mr. Harding Graduate School of Religion. He used to say in his intro, Old Testament intro class to this book, if he'd been looking for one woman, he'd have found her, which I loved. That's really there in the text, because one of the things he's going to find, he's going to tell us, one of the things that's valuable, just enjoy the wife of your youth, something he did not do himself. Anyway, so he tells us about conducting the experiment in chapter 2, and then from chapter 3 on, really through chapter 11, he's sifting through the data. He's making sense of his experiences, and it's not in a straight line. It's very much stream of consciousness, and so he's going to figure some things out preliminarily. He's going to have some moments where he has glimmers of hope. But then there are going to be long stretches of great despair. Despair at having wasted his life. Despair at the way things are in the world. They ought to be different, and they're not. And so, he's taking us through his own process. And the beauty of this is, at the end of this, when he comes to his conclusion, fear God and keep his commandments. This applies to everybody. We've earned the information. We've earned the knowledge. The book could be 5 verses long, but we would have learned nothing. Most of us would have learned nothing. But because he takes us through the experiment and takes us through, his thought processes as he processes the information that he's gained from his experiment, we have earned with him the information. And so we have experiential knowledge, and without investing a lifetime, because we get the benefit of his lifetime spent. And so in 12 chapters that you can read in about a half an hour and pray about and think about for the rest of your life, you reap the benefit of his largely squandered life. And yet at the end, it gives us this gift. He gives us this gift of the conclusions that he comes to in chapters 11 and 12. Yeah. Well, he asked that question. And what's the point of my wisdom? And has it served me at all? And you can have the gift of wisdom and not exercise it, or not exercise it in the right way. Early in his kingship and early in his rule, he clearly does. But that's a question that we all have to that we find ourselves asking. And one of the themes that he comes back to What's the value of wisdom? I'm going to be gone 2 Wednesdays. And Steve is going to fill in for me one Wednesday, right? Did I ask you to fill in for me one Wednesday? Yeah. No, then it wasn't you. I've got it written down. Alan's filling in for me one Wednesday. Bink is filling in for me one Wednesday. So the first Wednesday, Bink is filling in for me, and he's going to look at the beginning of the book of Proverbs, which celebrates wisdom, and particularly wisdom as a woman. And which it's interesting that the book of Proverbs celebrates wisdom. He keeps wondering about wisdom and the value of it, celebrates wisdom, and particularly personified as a woman in the first 5 or so chapters. And then Alan is going to go to chapter 31, and the wife of virtue, who can find? Because he's going to have some negative things to say about women, but he's also going to say in the book, you know, one of the true gifts that we're given is to enjoy the wife of your youth, the spouse of your youth. And so that's going to be, that's going to help us to give a context to the rest of the study. Tonight, we're going to look at his hypothesis, verses 1 through 11. And then next week, we're going to look at his process, his experiment. This is why I'm qualified. This is what I did. And then we'll have those 2 classes, and when I'm back with you, we're going to start processing the information in chapter 3 and 4. So before we look at 1 through 11, I have 3 things I want to read, 2 from the scriptures that I ask you to read, and then Chris went with Teresa and I last Saturday night, to a production of Our Town, Thornton Wilder's Pulitzer Prize-winning play, which is my favorite play. And the stage manager, who is kind of the voice of wisdom, he plays the minister in it too. So anyway, he has this to say in the last act when they're in the graveyard. He says, "Now there are some things we all know, but we don't take them out and look at them very often. We all know that something is eternal. And it ain't houses, and it ain't names, and it ain't earth, and it ain't even the stars. Everybody knows in their bones that something is eternal, and that something has to do with human beings. All the greatest people ever lived have been telling us that for 5,000 years, and yet you'd be surprised how people are always losing hold of it. There's something way deep down that's eternal about every human being." Is that true? I think it's true, but I live on this side of the cross, and I have the whole New Testament informing me that I've had in my life as long as I could make sense of words. In the Old Testament, what does the Old Testament say about the afterlife, and what did they understand of the afterlife? It depends on who we're reading. You can look at the end of the book of Isaiah, and we learn that the soul is eternal, I think, from chapters 65 and 66. It doesn't really emphasize heaven so much, or reward, although it mentions reward. It dwells a whole lot on hell. The fire is not quenched and the worm does not die. That's how the book of Isaiah ends. Hell is bad, and it's going to be forever, and you're going to be living through all of it. That's how the book of Isaiah ends. I wanted us to look at Psalm 90 and Psalm 103. David has a clear sense of eternal life with God beyond this life. Of all the Old Testament writers, he's the one who has a very clear sense of a couple of things, and we read it in Psalm 103, that God is our Father, that we have a parental relationship with God. Nobody else, really. God describes himself that way several places in the prophets, but in terms of somebody saying, "You're our Father, you're my Father," David is the one. And that we're going to dwell in the house of the Lord forever, Psalm 23. They're the last words of Psalm 23. Moses, not so much. So let's read Psalm 90, and I want to read them both because they connect to each other. David quotes Psalm 90 and mentions Moses by name in Psalm 103. And because they both, Solomon has the choice to take either viewpoint. And he doesn't take the viewpoint of his dad. Not for this book. He takes the viewpoint of Moses. So anyway, let's look at Psalm 90. Prayer of Moses, the man of God. I love this. I love this poem, this prayer, this psalm so much. The first line gets to me every time I read it. When you think about Moses, a man who was born in enslavement, taken from his mother in his early years, raised in the palace of Pharaoh, and then expelled, wanders around as a shepherd for a while. Where's home? Where does he belong? I mean, seriously, where is he rooted? And the opening line is this: Yahweh, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Where do I belong? I belong in you. You're home. Yahweh is home. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You return man to dust and say, return, O children of man, for 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. So many New Testament quotes from both these Psalms. You sweep them away with a flood. They're like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. We are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. All our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone and we fly away. He lived 50% longer than that, by the way. Who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you? So teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord. How long? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, and for as many years as we have seen evil. Do you see the limited scope of this? He's talking about our days, our years here. Let your work be shown to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let your favor of the Lord be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. When he looks forward into the future, he sees only as far as the next generation. The things we worked hard to establish, let them last for our kids into the next generation. And may they have something better than what we have. It's very limited in looking forward into the future. He asks for wisdom. He says, God, you're good. You're our dwelling place. We have a special relationship with you. From everlasting to everlasting, you're God. But you're mad at us, and you ought to be, because we don't deserve any of your gifts. Whatever happens to us, we deserve. Whatever happens to us happens in our brief span of time here in this fleeting life. So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Help us to understand how brief our time is here, and to use that time wisely. Satisfy us in the morning. May we rejoice and be glad all of our days. Let us just take joy in our relationship with you, and our special relationship with you in the morning and the evening, all the days that we have, all the years that we have here. It's quite modest in what it asks for. And yet in Moses' mind, he's asking for something that we don't even deserve. Is all that true? Of course it's all true. It's all true. Everything he says is true. God is God. We are exactly the way Moses describes us in this song. We are exactly that way. And who knew better than Moses, who for 40 years, led a people who were ungrateful, uncooperative, disobedient, and he knows better than any of us ever will the frailties of humanity, because he ate, slept, and drank, leading people like this all day long. I mean, the facts are as he described them. Now let's read Psalm 103, which would have been written 300 or so years later, and yet well known. I mean, seriously. They would have known this song. David would have sung this song, I'm sure. I mean, this is a guy who knows all the tunes. Who knows all. Who else knows all the songs the way David knows all the songs? Played those songs. You know that the one song you have by Moses is going to be well known. And he quotes it, and he mentions Moses by name in Psalm 103. Bless the Lord, O my soul. All that is within me, bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquities, heals all your diseases, redeems your life from the pit, crowns you with steadfast love and mercy, who satisfies you with good, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. The Lord works righteousness and justice for all who are oppressed. He made known his ways to Moses, his acts to the people of Israel. The Lord, Yahweh, is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. He will not always chide, nor will he keep his anger forever. He does not deal with us according to our sins, nor repay us according to our iniquities. As high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his steadfast love toward those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far does he remove our transgressions from us. As a father shows compassion to his children, so the Lord shows compassion to those who fear him. He knows our frame. He remembers that we are dust. As for man, his days are like grass. He flourishes like a flower in the field. The winds pass over it, and it's gone, and its place knows it no more. But the steadfast love of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting on those who fear him. That's eternity. And if we don't get to enjoy it for eternity, it has no meaning. David believes in an eternity in which we will enjoy the everlasting, steadfast love of the Lord. His righteousness to children's children, to those who keep his covenant and remember to do his commandments. The Lord has established his throne in the heavens. His kingdom rules over all. Bless the Lord, O you his angels, you mighty ones who do his word, obeying the voice of his word. Bless the Lord, all his hosts, his ministers who do his will. Bless the Lord, all of his works in all places of dominion. Bless the Lord, O my soul. In the same way that Moses' song is a dirge, and it very much is, David's song is just an explosion of praise, because he starts, bless the Lord, O my soul, inside of himself. And then he goes out to talk basically directly to Moses, includes God's people, and then he talks to the angels, and then he talks to all the heavenly host, and then he talks to all the works. He's inviting everyone to sing, almost like in Revelation 5, And then he brings it all the way back into his own soul again, and we begin where we end where we began. It's just an amazing effect, and I would love to have heard the music to know what it sounded like. But we get the effect with the words. So we have these two ways of seeing the same set of facts. One is very much an Old Testament way of seeing this set of facts, where you have a very limited knowledge of what's coming after. And you have a very limited knowledge of the Messianic age and what it's going to be like. And you don't have any of the 20/20 hindsight we have. And then another is when you do have a little more knowledge, like David has. And you know there's going to be a Messiah. You know that our relationship with God is the relationship of a child to a parent, of a son to a father, a daughter to a father. And you know that whatever it is we're going to enjoy it forever. And that's real. Whenever Solomon's older brother died in infancy, and David prayed and fasted and didn't take a bath and was prostrate on his face, when that baby died, what did David do? You remember? Yeah, and started to eat. And why? Everybody was amazed. Why are you doing this now? What did David say? David said, when the child was still alive, I thought there may be hope. But now, he can't come to me, but I can go to him. He has a consciousness of an eternal reward and a reunion that Moses does not have. So both are available to Solomon. And in the place he is in his life, which we're going to read about, when he makes his hypothesis, we know which one he chose. So let's read 1 through 11. The words of the preacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities. All is vanity. There's not really a way in English to get the sense of this. Emptiness. Vanity sounds, we use the word vanity, someone being vain, it's almost like prideful or, no, nothing. It's nothing. Everything is zero. Emptiness, meaninglessness. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? Or what does a man profit? Is there anything we can do here that's worthwhile, that makes any sense whatsoever? His initial answer is no. A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. Just remember that verse. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind. On its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be. And what has been done is what will be done again. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, look at this, it's new? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. The language is just gorgeous. It's just beautiful. And it survives translation. At one point, when my French was better, I read this in French back in college when I was preparing to apply to Baylor. Anyway, it was one of the things I did to get ready. And it's beautiful. I mean, with my limited knowledge of French, it's beautiful. I presume it's beautiful in every language, and probably more beautiful in other languages than it is in Hebrew, which is not a very beautiful language to the ear. But the language is just gorgeous. And it pulls us in. And the rhythms survive. That's the miracle of it. The rhythm of it. I mean, just the music of it is just there in English as it is there in Hebrew. And it rings true. I mean, everything he says is absolutely true and ancient. Like it's part of the primordial knowledge that we ought to have had from creation, I mean, it's just so, it comes from the depths of human experience. There's this melancholy beauty to what is being said. And what he's saying is, no. look at the earth as it is. No. Let's think about these verses. Well, first, let's think about the kinds of the reasons. He's got a list of reasons why in the beauty of this language. There is the inevitability of the cycles of existence. And the circle is a recurring theme. And he's mentioned a few circles here. The great expression of the circle of life, and it's an expression of futility, not an expression of hope, is in chapter 3. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. So there is the inevitability, which seems to take agency away from us, that we can affect anything. If everything is inevitable, if the earth is going to turn today as it turned yesterday, and it's going to turn tomorrow in exactly the same way, if the winds are going to go on their circular patterns, if the water cycle is going to continue the way it goes, then what's the point? How can you affect, anything? So there's the inevitability of things. There's the tiresome nature of things just recurring over and over and over again. Of course, this is spoken by a man who got to try everything, And so there's the weariness of riches that we hear in his voice already, and we will hear multiple times throughout. So then there is, just the way people are. In the same way that all rivers run to the sea, but the sea is not filled up, people are that way. It doesn't matter how much you feed your appetites, you are never full. If you've got an appetite for this sin or that sin or the other sin, or for this thing or that, you keep feeding it, and it's never enough. It's never enough. And yet, even though it's never enough, it's tiresome. You get bored with it. And you don't even get the satisfaction of looking forward to it. And having everything that you want doesn't give you the satisfaction of being full, of being satisfied. I know that's redundant, the satisfaction of being satisfied. And even creativity. You can't do anything that is new, that is novel. Novelty, really, if we think we are enjoying it or produced it, we're lying to ourselves, because everything is as it has always been. I experience this frequently in my old age, because I've been here nearly 30 years. and somebody will say, "Hey, let's try X." And I was at a church and we did it this way, and let's do it this way here. And I'll say, "Yeah, that's a good idea. We did it that way back in 99 and 2000, and it went really well. I don't remember why we stopped doing it. Let's try it again." And my enthusiasm is in no way appreciated, because I just said, we've already done this before. And the deflation in the eyes of the person, and sometimes there's a perverse pleasure in that, I have to admit. But anyway, but in fact, sometimes even the elders, in not in a kind way, call me the institutional memory, right to my face. Anyway, he's right. He's right. Oh man, I'm sorry, I'm that guy. Somebody will say, "Oh man, I love that song by so and so." No, it's not by so and so. It was by this artist before them and this artist before them, and was written by, nothing is new. And that leads us to the next point. I'm not just calling myself a curmudgeon for no reason. I enjoy being a curmudgeon. It's this. The reason that we think things are new is because even when somebody does something important, nobody cares a generation hence, because nobody remembers. Nobody remembers. And the poem Ozymandias, by Shelley. I already read 2 things, right? I read that. I am Ozymandias, king of kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing besides remain. But the endless sands stretch, far and bare. And that's not quoted correctly. But that is the rhyme. Despair and bear rhyme. Anyway, that's the way things are. There are a couple of of flaws in his argument already, and he's tipped his hat to them both if we listen closely. He has taken out of the equation eternity, right? But part of his argument is based upon a forever, isn't it? Verse 4. What does verse 4 say? I got to keep an eye on my watch. Oh, man, I've held us over a long time. What time is it? Oh, I got 10 minutes. Oh, that's right. This isn't Sunday morning. I was thinking, man, it's 5 till. I was supposed to end at 15 till. The earth remains forever. Well, it doesn't. That's not true. But he can't make that argument without there being an eternity. And everything that he said is only tiresome and full of despair when you deny eternity. You know? Now, he's going to tell us in chapter 3, verse 10, that God puts eternity in our hearts. God has given, this is verses 10 and 11, I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He's made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. There's no denying that we have a sense that there's something beyond. It's the feeling that it's beyond our grasp that causes all of this. And that is why this book is important. Because for all the deniers that there is a God, that there is an eternity, that life here is meaningless, that God is benevolent, that the way things are deny the existence of God or the goodness of God, this is the place to go. Because if that's really what you believe, then this is what you're left with. There's no reason to have... What's the point? What's the point of anything? What's the point of getting up in the morning if any of that is true? And nobody makes that point more clearly than Solomon does in this book. That's why I think it's increasingly important. And when we meet a young person, or a person our age, who has reached that place and who sees the injustice and who says over and over again, it ought not be this way, which Solomon says over and over again, this is an evil. This is an evil under the sun. It ought not be this way, and it is this way. Why does God let it be this way? This is a book that admits all of it. It says, yes, these are the facts. But if you take, if you don't take a New Testament view of things, if you're left with kind of the view and the limited knowledge that Moses takes when he writes his song, this is what you're left with. And in the very end, he says, no. Like the end of the book of Isaiah, there is eternity, and there's going to be judgment, and all this does matter. It does matter, because there's going to be eternal reward and eternal punishment, and we better be ready to face that moment. Okay. Anything on, let's see what else, let's see if I've missed something. Yeah, I did all that. Okay. And I did that too. Okay. Any comments, any questions before we? Okay. We're not going to be able to do a verse by verse for the rest. We're going to read every verse. Mikey, when I gave him Ezekiel, read every verse. Where is Mikey? He's not in here. Anyway, it's time? Oh, I have a hand up. Yes.
I was just going to say, having done political science, read about, nihilism, and it always comes from, the hedonism of youth, and where they go crazy, and they're partying, and they're with all the women, and doing all the things, they've got all the riches, and everything they want, and they get to this sense of emptiness, where it doesn't mean anything, and so it's like, this is, again, nothing new is under the Son. This is very much that language of, what is the point? And it's, you can see so much of the stuff that comes out later. It's like, it's here.
Yeah.
Like, all the things that were brilliantly said, by philosophers, it's already here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. She said that, that as he says, there's nothing new under the sun. When we talk about the Dionysians or those who twisted Epicurus's teachings, or Gregory Efimovich Rasputin in Russia, or hippies, or everyone who says just pursue hedonism, give in to your appetites, they arrive at a place of absolute emptiness. So, that's why this book is so important. We're arriving at a place where every form of despair that he experiences is being experienced, in the world around us. Just the, it's a bad cultural moment. It's always a bad cultural moment. It's just different. I don't think times are worse than other times. They're just different worse. They're just different bad. And this book, to me, is just perfect for the malaise and the despair that we are facing in this cultural moment. Yeah.
Earlier, that many of us don't get to go through all the things that he went through to be able to make these claims, these comments. And, you don't get through many chapters before it's almost exhausting.
Yeah.
And you just wonder, my goodness, why did he stop, 3 years ago or whatever?
Yeah.
And we were talking about wives and concubines at the beginning, and I almost think when you hear vanity screamed out 2 times in the first 2 verses, that he's repenting for having that 1,000th wife. This is where I started. But to have gone through so much and just to continue on the way he did, and to be able to stop and say, man, I was way off.
Yeah.
To not go through all that.
I know. And it makes you wonder, as Sam asked at the beginning, if you have this wisdom, don't you already have the wherewithal in your head to not have to go through all of this? But he did. And the thing is, God uses it to give us a gift. That is a necessary gift, I think, in this moment. There are no happy polygamists in the Word of God. None. No functional polygamous family, even when somebody tries their best, like Elkanah did. It doesn't work. So anyway, I think we can't make that point enough during our year that we're studying the family. So, yeah.
How we made all the gardens and everything.
Yeah.
And he went, and I'm like, you don't know how many people enjoyed those gardens. You don't know the effect that it had on other people.
I know.
And I can't believe he discounted that.
Yeah. That's true. But you remember what Moses said in Psalm 90, just preserve the work of our hands, just for our kids, and he probably feels the same way, I'm not personally fulfilled by this, and how long is it going to last? And knowing the terrible king his son was, not long, it didn't last, not long. So, anyway, yeah. Angela.
Do we know if he wrote all of this at one time, or if he wrote it over a period of time?
We know. The way he describes the experiment in chapter 2, it seems like he's having these thoughts in the moment, that while he's living this life, he's also almost compartmentalizing a viewpoint so that he can assess it while he's experiencing it. So, but I think the final form represents someone writing at the end of his life. I think it really is. It's like, do we have some of his 3x5 cards? Yeah, I think we do. But this is the final draft. of his findings. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Have we had 2 bells? Just 1 bell? Okay. Okay. Yes, Diane.
Saying, from the Jesus lineage came from starting with David.
Yeah.
And how the sons and the grandsons and everybody were such a mess. What happened to all the wisdom? I know they didn't follow the ways of the Lord, and I got that, but it's like, Christ is going to come from this. There's got to be, this is your responsibility to uphold it.
Well, not this Sunday, but in a couple of Sundays, we're going to talk about Cain and Abel. And one of the things I'm going to be mentioning, so you can tune out for that little part of the sermon if you need to check emails or. Sin is terminal, but it's also chronic. I mean, I don't want to say sin is not sin, it's a disease, but like a disease, it's a pandemic that we all sin and fall short of the glory of God. And as the New Testament points out, it's a terminal thing that we face, but Jesus saves us from the terminal part of sin. But then there's the chronic part of sin. It persists. And that's why we need the Holy Spirit to sanctify us. You remember early days of the pandemic. What did we know about COVID? Nothing. We knew nothing, although everybody was saying all kinds of crazy stuff. We knew nothing about it. And in the early days, a lot of people died. One of the things that we have to remember is that we benefit from the wisdom and the writings of generations. We have all the Old and New Testament, the whole counsel of God, and they're working with so much less information, and a great deal fewer examples, and of course they don't have the example of Jesus, which is the main example, and so I guess there are reasons. It doesn't justify the choices that they made in any way. But before we start feeling superior to them, let's remember the resources that we have that they did not have in dealing with sin. Okay. Anyone else? Doors are open in the back. Thank you so much. We're going to look at the end of chapter 1, and we're going to read through chapter 2 next time. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and for your attention. If you join us online, thanks for doing that too. And we'll pick up there next time.
Oh, how good it is when the family of God dwells together in spirit, in faith and unity, where the bonds of peace, of acceptance and love are the fruit of His presence here among us. So with one voice we'll sing to the Lord, and with one voice we'll lift out His word, till the whole earth sees the Redeemer has come, for He dwells in the presence of His people. Oh, how good it is on this journey we share, to rejoice with the happy and weep with those who mourn. For the weak find strength, the afflicted find grace, when we offer the blessing of belonging. So with one voice we'll sing to the Lord, and with one voice we'll lift out His word, till the whole earth sees the Redeemer has come, for He dwells in the presence of His people. Oh, how good it is to embrace His command, to prefer one another, forgive as He forgives, when we live as testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey, and the honeycomb. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey, and the honeycomb. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey, and the honeycomb. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be accepted in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey, and the honeycomb. And in keeping of them there is great reward, there is great reward. And in keeping of them there is great reward. Lord, I come, I confess, bowing here, I find my rest, and without you, I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart. Lord, I need you, oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Where sin runs deep, your grace is more. Where grace is found is where you are. And where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Lord, I need you, oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. So teach my song to rise to you. When temptation comes my way, and when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. And when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you, oh, I need throne before all of creation, all that I see. You stood alone in your glory, eternally. Then with a word you created galaxies formed at your feet. You're the highest of all, you're as high as can be. Glorified on the throne, give praise to the King. All of heaven bows down in worship those who gather